Wow. Now you can speak.
Now I can speak 5 minutes. I'm already
Yes, for
5
sure.
minutes here.
Take your own time.
Okay, guys, thank you for being here to listen to me. So this is a big deal, all written over there, but actually it's three completely different things: game economy, challenges, and Web3. Sometimes they go together. Most of the times they don't really talk. I would like to make this a bit differently from the other presenters. I'm going to talk about, let's say, the positioning of how game economy worked since the very beginning of games until the disruption of what Web3 might have done in the game development. But I would like this to be a conversation more than me presenting and you asking stuff. So I will present some things in there, and if you please want to interrupt me, I will actually appreciate that. So keep questions coming in as I present the slides. So moving on, it's kind of what I'm trying to talk here today. What is a game economy? Game economies change across time, post-X2E paranoia, next-gen economy, and a final conclusion. So what is a game economy? I've heard a few things here today, but actually, I want to ask if any of you has a definition of what is the game economy. Do I have anyone that wants to shortly just say what it is? Wow. Any of you have played any games ever? So no one knows what is the game economy. Okay, so there were two game designers early on. I don't know if they are in the public, probably they are they? Okay, so how about you guys saying what is a game economy? Because you mentioned that in there, but don't worry, you already did. And the game economy is just a layer of information that uses everything a game has, like mechanics, visuals, content, and it finds the best way to make money. That's a game economy. It can balance, it can auto-balance, it can create whatever type of processes you want, but the output of it is monetization. There's nothing else from a game economy other than that. And how do we think in economical terms when we are looking for these kind of things? We position ourselves in a perspective where we try to understand what is below us and what is above us. And we define the micro and the macro depending on how detailed, how atomic we want things to be. In this case, with a very specific definition, a micro is, for example, at the user level, transactions, very small, and a lot of these transactions together, for example, in a community, in a game, in a game hub, in a game ecosystem, all of that together will basically create a movement that can be analyzed in a macro movement, in a macro process. And it is a very slow process. This one has a lot of momentum. While the micro can have changes, trends, differences in how players like the game or not, huge amount of money flowing through everything, the macro continues to move slowly until it changes. And then it starts affecting the micro, and again, like a snowball going down a mountain. And a game economy works with these two movements. In Insight, early games from the very beginning, they basically already had game economies, and they have very clear challenges at the time. And we are looking at this and we say, to keep players entertained and offer a good replayability factor, this is a challenge for all games. You might read this and you say, no, this is the goal, right? Keep players entertained and replayability factor, this is a goal, this is a game design goal. They told us. Actually, the goal is making money. That's why we create games, to be sold. It's a business, it's not a hobby. So the challenge is to make money by keeping players entertained and offer them replayability. We are talking about very early games. We are talking about games from, I don't know, 70s, 60s, depending on what type of games, not necessarily video games, all games. And it was just a matter of measuring the progress of the player. It was so simple that the player scored a few hits. You remember a Pong game. 1, 2, 3, 4, a ball in the other side. And you get points, you get scoreboards. Sometimes you are awarded lives because you get enough points. You continue the game, you replay the game, you get a new level, you compare yourself with others. This is an economy. People like it, people spend, but they don't spend directly on the terms that we look today, because then we didn't have the type of technology that we have today. But they have other things. In this kind of features, we had a balanced sinks and sources because we wanted to retain people balanced in the game. There was nothing else. It was about fun, entertainment, time well passed. The economies were closed because there was nothing else to sell, actually. And this is what we can say that the old games were. They had a game, they had content, everything goes into the game variable. This was multiplied by the time they played the game, which was fun because they enjoyed it. And the monetization process came about the experience of fun. And I think these guys nailed it when they talked about the experience. It was about lacking this experience that made people buying sequels, buying side products, buying merchandising from the games they played. And since it was replayable, everyone that gathered around the same person that bought the game will play the game, and this continues on and on. Then came what we call the Web 2, and this is a big, large moment in the game design and the game development, 30 years, and it didn't end. And there were a lot of examples at this stage. And we look at there and we see, okay, so the challenge changed. And I look at these and it looks like, yeah, but it's a goal, right? Increase player spending, retain users, it's a goal. It's a marketing goal, it's a producer goal. And again, no. The goal for any game, making money. It's profit that matters. And in this case, the challenge changed. And it changed for a variable of reasons, and it changed across these 30 years. Now we have a different type of measurement. We don't measure progress the same way. We started manipulating the progress in order to find the right moment to monetize the players. We create more sinks than sources to create a deficit of what the players need to spend in order to continue playing. And because players are always looking for fun, and we kindly removed fun from the equation, we now start selling them what they need. And we sell fun. And fun is sold as immediate gratification. And I'm sure that if you played recent games, you all have seen like buy now and a lot of stars go into the screen. You really feel happy because you just acquired a new whatever. And for 5 minutes, you really feel great until everyone else does the same. They are at your level again, and you have to repeat the whole process. It was during this time as well that we started to have a lot of multiplayer games on desktop, online, web. And we started to have economies, real economies, closed economies similar to what the real world has. And players started to have the need to own something because they were struggling and giving effort to acquire such items. We are talking about, let's say, probably World of Warcraft will be the one that rings the most bells, but there were a lot of them before World of Warcraft, actually. They're still alive today, like Ultima Online. And these games had everything that we now say it's Web3, with just one thing. They could not own what they captured in the game. So they found their ways. They created black markets, and they sold accounts, they sold currency in gold, silver, depending on the game, for actual dollars. It's not very different from selling an NFT, but you needed to do it in a dark alley somewhere, either in the game or outside. But it was there. And let's say how the formula looks in this case. In 30 years, what happened is the game factor disappeared from the formula. So the content itself, the quality, the things that made the game interesting, it's gone. That's why you see many games released without the proper quality. You see games released that doesn't do anything else for innovation. You see sequels that are exactly the same as the prior game with just a few changes. So the game kind of disappeared. And the fun continued, but the fun now multiplied by the time gives profit, because that's what happens when you are buying fun while you are playing the game. So the goal comes profit from fun. And this is one of the biggest problems in the game industry right now, and why players are mostly rebelling against big companies. It's because they feel exploited. Their time is not rewarded, and they have to pay not just to play games, but also to experience any fun from the games they play. So it's a problem. And there was a moment before Web3 that some games started to think, okay, so we don't need intermediaries. We don't really need gold, silver, or credits, or whatever currency we want to use in our games. We can use direct money. This was before Web3. And a few titles, I don't know if you know any, but there was a few, they tried to make complete player-driven economies based on real money in Web 2 worlds. They didn't go too far. They failed, but it was a good intention. There was probably the wrong time for them to do anything at all, but I reward them for the attempt. Until, of course, the time came when we actually did it, and we did it with Web3. And as the sentence says, once you realize that you actually put the money in the core loop of the game, it's all about money. Nothing else really matters. And this is the exponential of the truth in that statement. When early Web3 game economies started to rise from the technology, exploits, and all the indie groups that most of them were not even game developers started to trying creating games, the goal, remember, is always the same, making money. The challenge changed a bit because now it was obviously that the interest was real money. So it was clear that attracting investment and making as many transactions as possible was the primary goal for every of these companies. And below are some of the features that these games presented. I have written probably some of the most disruptive, but let's say the introduction of DeFi. It was not very well introduced. It was called game finance, and it led to what we call now X2E, sorry. And it didn't really work. It created a huge gap in situations, people losing money, people losing expectations of what the game was, not understanding how gameplay works, losing anything that they had by loving a game. The old experience was gone. And everything was basically oriented for investment. In this case, the economy is open to the world, and they were not more closed. They weren't hybrid. They were completely open because these games were public. They were quoted in the stock market, if we want to call it so. So this was directed at investors. This is the new variable for Web3 games. I mean, early Web3 games. You have investment, you spend time investing, and you get profit, or not. And the goal maintains more profit. So what happens? We had this, it disrupted the market in a bad way, in my opinion. And we created a new type of player. It wasn't a player that existed in any kind of persona that we had identified in the demographics. And now we have an investor, trader, retail trader, investment bankers, buying tokens into games that they never wanted to play. The focus changed. Gaming, as we looked earlier on, was no longer something that was being built. It was just a financial instrument in order to get money from investment, from people that were really passionate about games, and many of them no longer are really very aligned with Web3 because they have lost a lot of it. It also opened the doors for volatility. It's a dangerous thing to have currencies and variables in a game environment that have been influenced by stock markets. Game wallets became target for hackers because there was a lot of value accumulated in there. Something that was just because I wanted that character, I was going to hack that account to just have something else to trade and exhibit to people. But now we are talking about real assets. So it's serious, it's problematic. Player retention? No, there was no player retention anymore. The product didn't have retention. What had retention was the opportunity cost of playing the product. If the cost was higher because the market was down, you just dump the product, you move to another one. You don't need a game that is fun for that. So fun was no longer part of it. And players were feeling excluded from the game environment because the games were no longer made for them. They were made for a different type of persona. So new challenges arise. And these arise because the biggest market that we have, not the biggest, but probably the second biggest market in the world, is game development. So it needed to change. A lot of money is invested into this. And new challenges arise to change what was the panorama of building games in Web3, because Web3 is coming to stay, it's not going away. It's a technology that is going to change a lot of things, including gaming. So some of this was, I'm not going to repeat most of it because my colleagues there already did most of this. But there are a few that I wanted to talk. Players are no longer players. They are shareholders, they are owners, they are builders alongside developers. And because of this, they need to be treated differently. They need to be involved, and they need to be part of production. Of course, there's always rules, and it's always a risk. But communities now have a weight that never was the case before this. Protecting players and developers from game exploits and account hacking. There's value inside that. There's real money. Exploiting games just because the mechanics don't work. It can't happen. A bug exploited in a game will give more lives, more gold to a player, a new weapon or whatever, and now it gives $1 million. So we have to be careful about it. Scaling, and it's not the scaling in technology, but the scaling in usage. Scaling in an economy is going to be much more difficult. Because the scaling in an economy, what can work with 100 people playing in a specific economy, and we can monetize 100 people, if we get to 10,000 people, 1 million people, the same economy can break, and instead of making us profit, it gives us deficit. So it's much more risky scaling the game to be used by many players, and of course we are talking about online games, multiplayer games where they interact with each other. It doesn't even make sense to talk in different ones. A wide adoption for non-technical users is needed. Gamers need to go back into gaming. Web3 is not, at this point, comfortable for most of them. They fear Web3. They don't understand the way they need to interact with Web3 mechanisms. Account abstraction is one of the things that need to be solved, but actually it wasn't yet, and that's a barrier, a huge one. Compliance, credibility, and adoption, yeah, all those things have been talked about. But one thing that hasn't been talked about is reputation rescue. Web3 has lost a lot of reputation with gaming. And this new challenge, with some games in the making right now, are kind of the hope that they are able to rescue part of that reputation, delivering games that actually make sense to be built. Some highlights of what might be the next generation economies. Time, as was mentioned, it was fun, is no longer cheap or abundant and should be meaningfully rewarded. Time becomes a currency, much more important than ever was. Fun should become the focus variable again, once more. Games are meant to be fun, and that's a really important thing when building games. But it was removed from the variable early on, bringing back the game variable to the equation. Games have lost content. We need that content to be able to call these games again. But now games need to have protections, safeguards against the external market volatilities. If we are dealing with real assets, and we will be dealing with real assets from now on, these needed to be shielded from these markets. There are countless solutions for this. We can introduce dual, triple token systems. We can introduce yield backing systems, real asset-backed tokens. Count it. There's a lot of mechanics. It's not what I'm going to talk about today, but there are NFTs. Many kinds of NFTs can be used, since dynamic ones, morphic ones, progressive ones. All of them can be applied into mechanics, and then we can create good economies with those mechanics. Community needs to be back, and needs to be introduced into the economy system, and probably in the whole mechanics of the game, not just as part of a support team that is waiting to buy the product. And it also needs to change the paradigm of monetization. Monetization goes towards publishers, goes towards developers in a small percentage. And with all these talks about decentralization and democratization of the systems, one thing that needs to happen in next-gen economies is exactly that. The players need to be part of the monetization system and not be the part monetized. And this is really important to create the balance needed to restore faith and to move to the next stage of what Web3 is. And just to finish this one is the non-spenders. Non-spenders right now are the critic mass, so that they can be target for advertisement to get some revenue out of them. But the fact is, non-spenders are the ones that work. The spenders are the ones that have the money to pay for services. So when we are talking about game economies, where players drive the economies, they have a place. They are no longer non-spenders, they are workers. They are responsible for the progression of the economy, so that the spenders can actually have something to spend. And with this, we are brought very close to what a real economy is. And this is it. You bring everything back together, you multiply it, and you have profit. But you not have profit like it was before. You can actually have a sustainable profit. You can have a sustainable environment in Web3 that is basically distributing and supporting everything and creating real value. Value that people want to pay for, because value is nothing if no one wants to pay anything for it. Conclusion, I will pass forward because I think it's clear.